Yes, sir. I'm actually going to let Ms. Tyndall start off this discussion. She's the one that has been working with the health system on getting these quotes, so we'll be happy to answer questions after she completes her presentation.
Official, and this is what they sent me. So we have the letter from Mr. Hunt, and it just goes over what they'll do is come on site, and I think, Mr. Burrows, you have a special room that'll be put aside for the employees. They're gonna do a biometric analysis, which would include the high weight, BMI, blood pressure, A1C, full lipid panel. They'll do a PSA for men over 50, and then an optional flu shot. I think most people have gotten a flu shot, but they'll have that available if they would like. And the cost for that is $45 an employee for the most part, and then for the few that will be over 50 that might participate in the PSA, that is $30. When you look at your own EOBs for what you're paying for that, this is so low. I mean, this is a very, very reasonable offer, so we were excited that it was so attainable and not going to break the budget. The A1C, as you know, is a hemoglobin test testing glucose, and that would identify any risk for diabetes. And the lipid panel is going to be the full cholesterol panel.
So they'll be drawing blood?
They'll be drawing blood. All of the reports are going to go back to the employees. There won't be any reporting coming to the commission. It's 100% confidential. So we're hoping that the employees, although this program is voluntary and we can't make them participate, but because they know that the lab results and all the information is just going to go to them directly, and the only thing that we'll be able to report back to the commission is how many people participated. It's a great first start. We can build on it. I did go back and ask for, I thought it might be interesting to see what would it be like if we had a skin test. That's something a lot of our guys and girls work in the sun. Would that be something that they may participate in? They really don't like to do that because obviously you would have to show some skin to have that done. And so maybe that's something that could be done in a different place. So we can build on that in the future, but this is a great first start, and we just wanted to bring to you what we had and see what your thoughts were.
Have we thought about any incentives?
We have. In the past, for safety and wellness programs, we have offered incentives of maybe a raffle for a television or something of that nature that has been successful, is my understanding. But we will be trying to incentivize them to get their wellness check in some way, but I am open to suggestions on what we should raffle off.
Half-day comp pay.
That actually would probably get more attention than the television.
Maybe even
A full day comp day if somebody, if for everybody, not for everybody gets a chance to win that for everybody that puts in, so.
Yeah.
And the numbers, the 7290, that is the 162 staff positions times 45. So not everybody's going to participate, and so that allows us to, those individuals that would need the PSA could still fall under that amount most likely.
Yeah, and Glynn County has a wellness program too, and has an office set up for it, and it's expanded to some prescription drugs, some wellness checks, check-ins, consultations, weight management, those kind of things. So I don't know, this is a great starting point, I think, and then it reflects in the health insurance, feeds over to, you know, I think, and I'm not positive of this, but I think it's mandatory for county employees to go through the annual wellness.
Yes,
check.
sir, I believe it is.
So at some point, you know, we can bring this in. Maybe it will eventually help bring it down health insurance costs. So.
Yes, sir.
Well, on what grounds does the county make it mandatory?
Part of their health insurance, but I do not have enough information to speak factually on it.
That have anything to
so-
do with them being self-funded?
Yes, and they also, this is a health clinic that the county contracts with the health system to provide to the employees, that they do have to use them. It's still all private, but they were trying to find a way to manage some of their bigger risks, and they are using the health clinic. At the statistics on what that's been, how that saved them money, I think there's probably been enough time to pass to see what that's done, but we can certainly get with Aura and see if you'd like. So we'll move forward
Just
on.
for comparison's sake.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to know if we can make it mandatory, I would like to do that. Agree with that?
I do.
And it's still, all the information's still confidential, you know.
Yeah, I don't wanna know
Right.
the information,
Yeah.
but I want them to know the
Sure.
information.
Right,
Well, a healthy workforce is a good workforce.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is on, do we wanna go ahead and send this up to the full commission for approval?
Yes, sir.
I'm not opposed to it.
I'm not opposed to it.
Okay, can you make a motion?
All right, I move that the Human Resources Committee recommend approval to the attached wellness agreement with Southeast Georgia Health System for a not-to-exceed amount of $7,290.
I second.
Do you have any questions? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That'll go to the commission this afternoon. Okay, now we're to discussion items, open enrollment and update.
Thank you very much. So as you recall, we had a pretty smooth open enrollment process. We did make some minor changes to the plan, including how the emergency room is covered. It's now, was a copay, now it goes towards the deductible. We hope that that's gonna keep claims a little lower, and there was a lot of education in the meetings that talked about not only the telehealth, but also the urgent care that could be used instead of the emergency room. The biggest change that you made is you reduced the deductible and out-of-pocket for the employees by reimbursing half of the deductible of their choice on the plans. And when that was presented to the employees, it was the first positive meeting we've had in a really long time. They were very, very grateful for the fact that the commission recognized that those deductibles were high and that the out-of-pocket costs were difficult to reach. So the way that it was all put together, they were very, very pleased, and it was one of the most positive open enrollments we've ever had since the inception. So we appreciate you all supporting that and supporting the staff so much. We did go over a lot of things that you all talked about in regards to detail on the plans. One of the concerns the commission had was, do the employees really understand the difference in the HSA and the other two copay plans? So we put together a new side-by-side comparison that we added the health reimbursement account on the deductible to, so they could clearly see what those differences were, and that was also well received. We talked about wellness and encourage them to see their own private doctors, discussing how to find a doctor. And we did have an online enrollment this year, so we saved many, many, many trees. But there were a lot of employees that just don't use the computer on a regular basis. So Teamwork was flooded with employees that were given one-on-one counseling, and that went smoothly. They enrolled at their office, and everything was taken care of, and we had 5 meetings. There were 2 at the plant, 2 at the main location, and 1 on St. Simon's, and we believe that everyone that wanted to attend certainly did. We talked about the qualifying events process, and also talked about the new flexible spending account, dependent care spending account cards. So many things were expanded, and we changed some of the ways that we talked about education and didn't overwhelm them with paper, and tried to just stick to the information they needed to know the most. And we think that it was a positive outcome overall. So going into the self-funded,
Well, before we
Yes.
get to that, no, Mr. Donahue, you correct me if I'm wrong, but after the open enrollment period, it appears our insurance cost from the commission is actually decreasing. Very small, but it is going down a small amount going into next year's budget based off of the elections people made.
Okay, so this is for 2021, that'll go down slightly. Okay.
Better than a slight increase. isn't it?
Absolutely.
We'll take slight anytime we can get it in the insurance market. Yes, sir. Any questions about the open enrollment process or the HRA? We also met with the staff leadership and had multiple discussions on the details of the HRA. How would that work? What would it look like? What would they need to, what would the employees have to submit to be reimbursed? And we worked out all those details, drew up the contract. And when we went to the HRA provider, we expected the attorney to charge about $2,000, $2,500. And when we looked at that, I found another vendor, and it was $500 for the contract. So we actually saved a slight bit of money there as well. So we were pleased. A contract is a contract, and we were happy to have it a little bit lower. Any questions on that? Okay, so the self-funded update. We have, I spend my time at night thinking about this. I am living in the self-funded world. And so we are evaluating what that's going to look like. If we were in a self-funded plan 12 months ago, what would that have looked like? 12 months from now, what will that look like? It does require a crystal ball we don't have, but we are looking at what that model would look like. What's the worst case scenario if we go self-funded and we have the worst claims year? What happens if we have the best claims year and everything in between? So one of the things that you have to keep in mind about a self-funded plan is it's hard to get out of inexpensively. It's a very expensive venture to go back to fully funded. So what is that going to look like? So one of the things that we wanted to ask this committee is, how do you want this presented? We expect to have everything ready next month. Do you want us to come back to this committee and go over that proposal? Do you want a work session? And you have plenty of time to decide on that, but we wanted to just defer to you all to see what your thoughts were.
I think, yeah, work session.
I think a
We need
work
to discuss it.
Okay.
One thought is to look at a hybrid also.
Yes.
And my thoughts, Katina, is while our organization may not be big enough to move to a self-funded, go 3 years and then move back without a significant entry cost, is if we go to a hybrid and perhaps we look at covering certain items as part of this hybrid. We cover some of those items that might be the multiple event that can lower our cost and premium, but overall, it would, while we might be funding a portion of it, that the entire cost would still be less. And it could perhaps put us on a trajectory of positive improvement over a number of years.
And we actually, that's called level funding, and that means that you're not on the hook for all of the claims. The insurance company still pays the claims, but if you have a positive claims year, you may receive a rebate. If you have a negative claims year, you're going to have a higher renewal. So we had that several years ago, and we did it for maybe 1 or 2 years with Cigna. When we bid this out every year, and it's the lowest bid that wins, we don't really stay in anything long enough to see how that works, because if we have another bid that comes in at 8% less, at 8% times 123 employees, and you see that you could save $200,000, how could you not leave that and go over to save that $200,000? And then the next year, you do the same thing. So we've moved quite a bit, and it's sort of a difficult process for you all to say, do we stay at something that we know is going to be higher or move to something else? Not all carriers have that, but I agree with you. That's what I think is the best course of action.
Yeah, where I'm going with this is we could perhaps raise our value to a carrier by not hopping around every year. They will value our business, although we're a relatively small player, but if, I'll use the word loyalty,
Yes.
to a carrier, if we stay with them for 3 years or something, we've got a track record better than 12 months. And also, if we self-fund a portion of it, basically that we take on some risk and the carrier takes on the risk of the catastrophic events. And while some years it may cost us a little bit more, other years it could be quite beneficial. So I would look at it more on a 3 to 5 year approach rather than a 1 year. So just a thought to look at when you're developing some model for sharing with us.
Through this process, I think we want to have some sort of philosophy statement as to where this commission is headed, so that future commissions, when new commissioners come on, understand the philosophy that we have in approaching our health plans, and hopefully that would continue. That only, jump from one carrier to another carrier if it was absolutely necessary based on cost and service.
And quite frankly, that's what it's been. It has been about cost and service. And when someone gives you a better bid and there's nothing really holding you back with the last person or the last company, I mean, it's been difficult to not take that bird in the hand savings.
Well, I think if I understand correctly, that the idea is to let the carrier understand that we want to have some loyalty over a longer period of time and claims. And I don't know how we can do that. I mean, we do it annually, but can we sign up for a contract that is 3 years?
And I'll look into that and see what their flexibility is. One of the other things we can do is if we are gonna look at self-funded, maybe the individual deductible's not $100,000, maybe it's $25,000. So that may be something that, obviously the savings isn't gonna be significant, but the risk would be lower as well. So with that in mind, I'll go back and keep those things in mind as I'm putting all the information together next month. But I will say the step you took in giving that deductible back to the employees and reimbursing them and bringing that cost down without bringing the cost up with the commission was really great. And because the group is so small, it was easier to tailor that. It'd be harder to do with the county or someone so large. But I think that was so well received, and even on the budget side.
Yeah, I think it's there's a couple of components to help us to get where, in my view, where we want to go. One, we want to educate our employees so they become healthier. And also that they are financial stewards of their own health care. And we're a partner of that health care by providing a reasonable valued benefit. And if the commission can help manage the cost through risk management, that's probably the direction that we can offer better input as a governance commission, is to manage the risk down. And then the cost for the individual employee and for us, for our self-funded portion, I think will fall into play. And that our trend should be over 3 to 5 years, should continue to improve. Having worked with some other companies, we had benefit packages that were adjusted only on price but not benefits. And so we had a longer track record with a few carriers rather than hopping to one every year or every 2 years. And by doing that, that manages the risk on loss of premium, if you will, for the carrier. And we had a lot more employees too. But I think for us is if we look at risk management purely from the long-term cost to us, then I think our employees can benefit from that.
Thank you.
One other thing on this particular point, can I get the enrollment statistics? Send that to all the commissioners or provide it?
So just how many enrolled in each of the plans this year? I'll send that to Mr. Burrows, and you can send that out. All right, any questions about that? And you all will get with Mr. Burrows and come up with a time and date for the work session. Okay, great. Mr. Burrows?
All right. You already talked about tobacco and BMI premiums.
Did you bring the cigars?
I did not bring the cigars today. With that being said, there was a lot of discussion at our insurance renewal meeting about either providing a discount to those people that don't use tobacco and meet BMI standards, or providing a penalty or additional premium to those that do use tobacco or BMI is too high on their next insurance premium. Given that we're looking at this self-funded option, we probably need to make a decision on this sooner rather than later. So I guess I was looking for direction on whether you wanted to give a discount to those that are healthy or a penalty to those that are not, and when you would like to start that.
I always like a discount versus a penalty. A penalty means that, you know, now you are saying something to the employee that, you know, even though you're trying to force them to get in shape,
Right.
but, you know, incentives I think are more, are better
Okay.
than punishment.
I like the idea of a discount. The county uses the penalty. And basically, it's a penalty in your insurance premium
Right.
with the county. And if you're at higher risk, you pay more for being a higher risk.
But the state also gives a penalty
Ask
too.
me how I know. So,
The state gives a penalty as well.
Right.
I understand that, but, you know, we can try for a discount first, and if it's not working.
I agree with that.
then
But
go-
let's see if we can incentivize.
Yes,
Okay.
if we can't, then we can
And
always
then-
go to the penalty.
The follow-up question to that would be, we had talked in the previous meetings about maybe picking next year's date and giving them a year to comply with that. Is that something we still want to do, or we want to look at that when we look at our self-funding option?
Well, we're gonna do the wellness checks,
Right?
and then the results of that will, I think, drive
And-
that decision.
And perhaps to tie in with the wellness check, they have to enroll in the wellness program for us to be able to monitor the improvements that they made.
Sure.
For them to be able to qualify for an incentive a year from then, so.
I agree with Commissioner Neal.
I just need to know how long I get to study for the test.
I can't tutor you, I'm sorry. I
Well,
can't help
I'll
either.
I'll offer a few thoughts. Is, first year that we do this, it ought to be the test year. So we're providing information to our
Right.
employees, and they understand where they are and where,
We want them to be.
what the hurdle is to get to receive this incentive for being healthier. And then roll it out the next term. That would be my recommendation.
Just being the devil's advocate here, what benefit then does a healthy employee who remains healthy get? Because in this, I want mine too.
I would certainly think if you remain healthy, you would still get the discount. It's just, we give them at the wellness check, the information to say, here's what you're going to have to do because you currently don't meet the requirements to get there next year when we start doing this.
And if someone, like a BMI is way over, then you can't expect them to bring, you need to set goals, and intermediate goals, that they hit milestones.
Yeah, part of the
by
wellness,
By the, you know, not go from,
I think the wellness program offers coaching to folks as they
the
take the
county side
wellness.
does. I don't know if what.
What
Those
the
are-
health system is doing is just testing. There is coaching and as part of their health plan, there is.
Right,
Mhm,
that's
there
where
is-
I'm
there is a
going with that.
program.
Yeah, United Healthcare has all that
Right,
information.
and
we
that's
can
where the
provide.
employee can receive a useful benefit should they choose to do that. Sometimes that's a self-reflection, and sometimes it's pretty difficult to change behaviors, but it's available.
If I may, the county, if you are a county employee and you decide that, or you know you're a tobacco user, or you know your BMI is not within range, you can go ahead and just check the box and know that you're going to pay the little higher. Same with Southeast Georgia Health System. If you know you're not going to qualify for that discount, you just check the box and sort of, you've self-reported yourself. However, if you say that you are someone who does not use tobacco or has a BMI within range, we would have to figure out, how do you say your BMI is not in range, or they do testing at the health system. So if you say, I'm not a tobacco user, they do test. And the range is not that much of a difference, so you'll also have to decide how much of a discount do you want to provide. For instance, Southeast Georgia Health System, it's only about $8 a pay period difference. So it's not so significant that if I know I'm not going to qualify for that discount, I can go ahead and save the questions and check that box. So you'll,
That's the thing that concerns me about our workforce and that I see that they have problems with is they drink way too much sugar. And, you see them, you know, they get Gatorade, Powerade, and all that other stuff. And they really ought to just be drinking water, and I know we give them that.
one thing you could do if you wanted to, you could hire a nutritionist to come in and go to the different meetings and just talk about some of that. And even if you wanted to talk to them, not so much about losing weight, but just how you would feel so much different if you remove the sugar. I mean, you could bring in people in addition to, maybe it's not Southeast Georgia Health System wellness, but in addition to educate those sorts of issues very easily. I don't think it would even be that much. So, but I agree. I mean, they work outside a lot of Powerade, a lot of Gatorade. There are vending machines, and even removing them, I don't think would make any difference. But if you wanted to address that further, we could look into a nutritionist if you'd like. Is that a yes? You would like us to look into a nutritionist?
Yeah, I think we let the executive director look at it. We need to,
So we'll wait for direction
Yeah,
back.
I think we
It's
probably.
gonna be hard to regulate behavior, and personal habits.
oh, no, I know it's impossible. It's
But,
just,
again, it's motivation, I think, is,
well, we need to give them ways to get
yeah.
what we want them,
Right.
BMI-wise.
The last thing, what I've seen with another group is they announced ahead of time, this is what we're going to do in 12 months. This is what it's going to look like in 12 months. Get ready, we'll see you in 12 months, and give tools and tips on how to get there, and just let them know it's coming. Then when it comes next year, it's not a surprise to anyone. And they had a year in advance, so there's not very much pushback on something like that. So that's why we had the question, we can start at 7/1 if we move in this direction. It's always the possibility we won't, but if we did, or we could start at 7/1 of next year or 3/1 of next year, depending on how this next month goes.
Thank you.
Do you have would you like to wait the year or immediate?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll wait for further
I'll
direction.
get back with you.
Okay, thank you.
We don't know yet.
Gotcha.
Okay. Are we now to potential pension plan changes?
Yes, sir. All right, so as we've been discussing the pension plan, our existing pension plan is a defined benefits plan with GMA. The current calculation for the JWSC's cost each year is 6% of wages plus overtime, plus a percentage of the unfunded liability each year. We're currently running about 7.5% of our covered payroll as our pension expenses. And there's also been a lot of discussion about requiring employees to begin contributing to that. And so we looked at a few options. GMA does offer a defined contribution program that the benefit upon retirement is still calculated the same way. The only difference is how you pay for it along the way. So for people that have been in the GMA retirement system, it's 2% times number of years of service, as that's what your final benefit will be. If we look at going to a defined contribution plan with GMA, same calculation, the only difference is the employees would be paying a portion of that. We talked in the past, and seems to be general consensus that we do this for new employees only. And so looking at this, we talked to GMA, and we did show this study back in November that is attached. We looked at 2.5% of salary and changing the vesting periods. You can see the cost to the employer drops off fairly steeply moving forward as we have turnover in our staff. And if we went to, say, a 3% contribution, that would be an even more steep decrease in the employer contribution rate. Talking to GMA, if we went this way, they're going to need 6 to 10 weeks to administer the changes. And if we want those changes to be effective with the new budget year, we would need to get this information to GMA no later than April the 22nd, which gives us about a month and a half to get this done. My recommendation would be to bring an approval item to this committee in April that would change the pension elections for employees hired after July 1st of 2020 to require 3% contribution, and change the vesting schedule for those employees from the current 3 to 5 year vesting period to a 10-year cliff for those employees. And we could have that administered by GMA, and there'd be no administrative cost from GNA to do this. We could look at other options. We had the gentleman speak to us via phone about studies that we could do and other plans we could look at outside of GMA. That would require quite a lot of administrative costs to get those things done. So this is my recommendation to move forward.
I don't see a chart here for the 3%.
There's not a chart for the 3%. This study was done in 19, it's 2.5%. So I can get this study updated before the next meeting if that's something that we are considering. But certainly, if the new employees are paying 3% versus 2.5%, this curve should shift even lower than what it currently is showing.
And we're talking about this at the county
Right.
as well, and conversations going all over everywhere. And we're having outside input trying to influence some of the decision by providing some helpful information. That being said, and nobody hit me, what is the cost if we close the defined benefit plan, and whatever you have in the defined benefit plan you're still entitled to and will receive upon retirement, start over with a defined contribution plan with all employees, and basically our vested employees, existing employees, would then be working toward 2 retirements. The benefit plan would be there, it's theirs, but everybody starts on a new program.
If the defined benefit plan, GMA's defined benefit plan is terminated, then there is an order of payout of the plan benefits to eligible employees, beginning with already retired employees, and then going down that list. So someone that has some investing in the plan may not wind up getting anything from this if the assets are insufficient to supply that to them.
Well, in my understanding, and I don't pretend to be well-versed in this, because we're studying it, but that your retirement would still come at your retirement age, that it wouldn't be a closing of the program and a payout immediately. It would still be whenever you're eligible for retirement. It's tagged to and held to a defined contribution for our existing employees. And I know this isn't a popular thing, but it's how a lot of industry has done it. And I'm not even saying I'm supporting it. I just would like to know the information.
We can get that information to you, certainly, from GMA, how they would, because the issue would be funding for the existing plan, with the unfunded portion at termination. So we'd have to see how they would amortize that if we're no longer an active participant in that plan. Because there's going to be a shortfall naturally upon termination right now. I think it's $2.5–3 million. So that's still gonna have to be paid to pay out the vested interest in the existing plan.
Yeah. And this sounds different than what I'm hearing over at the county, that the benefit still comes at the time of retirement or termination.
Yeah,
But
the benefit would still come at that time. We wouldn't necessarily pay it out, but for them to get that benefit calculated via GMA, we're gonna have to have the money in the account to pay it out at time it comes in.
Yeah.
So we're still gonna have to amortize that unfunded portion over the next few years.
and nobody else is getting any information and feedback from.
I've seen it done just like you talk about, Commissioner, is where the defined benefit plan was sunsetted.
Yeah.
And those who qualified for that for the period of time, once they retired, they received those benefits and what was
Whatever they earn.
their contributed plan
Yeah.
was. So they had two pensions, if you will, or two funds. And that's a way to transition over from a financial burden that will mushroom over time if we didn't do anything.
Right.
So we have that option that you're suggesting that could be done, and I think that ought to be ferreted out in our work session that we
And
have.
I agree, and I don't want to belabor this. I think we need to keep moving this thing forward, but I think it would be good to have that information, because it will cost JWSC less money. We have to also look at unintended consequences, that it could have. So you know,
Rough figures, if we started making everybody contribute today, you would take a little less than half of the overall pension payment away, which would be about $300,000 a year. The overall pension payment's $650 to $700, so a little less than half of that would be taken away, because 3% of the 7.5 we've got, you're looking at $250,000 to $300,000 in savings.
and
So how long would it take us to make up for that unfunded?
They have different portions of it funded right now. We could always contribute more than what they're requesting and pay it off much quicker. They kind of amortize the large portions like a mortgage, and it might be 30 years before you pay it off.
Oh, jeez.
So it's really dependent on if you want to contribute more or not.
All right.
and certainly, we've got to look at quality of life for our employees, and none of us want to hurt the value that they are to us. But we've got to look at it, and I think we need to be able to look at it by comparison, is what is that gonna cost? And, you know, I have up until this point been one to combine the two, and those that are on it continue on it, and we've talked in that, but, and I don't wanna put words in Commissioner Stevens' mouth, but he and I have talked about this a little bit as well. And I was asking questions of him as it concerns the county side of it, and just trying to get educated so that we can make the best informed decision.
Sure.
Okay, so we need 2 work sessions.
Or a work session that
But-
covers two things.
Yeah, we'll check on both of them. We do both of
I
them.
think we can do both of them in one?
Probably could.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is there any other business for the committee?
I have nothing else.
No, sir.
Committee members?
No, sir.
Any further, Mr. Jones?